Okay, so now we're live. Um, this is Baish. We're breaking it down with Baish. I don't have a fancy intro yet, like Stan or Jukebox does, or Benny Green. But I will. I will have one. It's gonna be dope. It's gonna be awesome. Um, I am Baish from Breaking It Down with Baish. Subsidiary, I am partnering with the ROC, Return of the Critics, the other podcast. And today, with Breaking It Down with Baish, we are going to be talking about fatherhood and everything that goes along with that, whether that be the person you pick, the people you're around, people you listen to, um, and then also obviously, your kids. So, I was a dad at a really young age. So at 18, uh, my oldest son was born, and um, you're never really 100% ready to be a dad. Like you sit there and you're like, okay, well, everything's gonna be great. This kid's gonna be spitting image of me. And if you're a competent dad, you know, your kid turns out okay. My grandpa used to always tell me, as long as you keep your son out of cuffs and your daughter off the pole, you've done an okay job. But yeah, uh, when my son was born, it was more of a huge, huge learning project because didn't know how to change a diaper, had to learn that on the fly. His mom was there, but we didn't get along, so that made it difficult. Um, I was super immature. Could have been a way better dad when my son was younger, but as that was going, I didn't understand the other level to being a dad was you have to worry about the person you had a kid with. And that sounds like, well, duh. But when you're going through all that and you're young, you're just thinking, okay, well, I'm with this person. I'm going to stay with this person. No matter what, I'm going to be with this person and everything is going to be awesome. That's not true. That's totally not true because um, I had a vision in my head of what I wanted the person I was with to be, and she wasn't that. But I knew that even before, we had sex and a kid popped out. But yeah, that was a huge hurdle, a huge issue to deal with. And then plus I was in school, so that was going weird. Trying to manage my time between being a dad and doing other stuff. And then also after a while, I was just like, okay, well, he's at home. Everything's good. I don't have to worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's not what you should do. I'm gonna go out and hang out with my friends. I'm gonna go to like frat parties. I'm gonna go do other stuff. And you know, I neglected being a good dad. I paid for everything, but money wasn't what my son needed. He needed, a dad at home to teach him stuff and do stuff. I started doing that when he got like 4 or 5, but I think I missed out on a lot of those, years with stuff. Stu- just me being dumb and young. Um, I went back to that well again with my son's mom and had my youngest daughter. And, she's spoiled. I love her to this day. She's my princess, but that was the worst decision having her with that person again. And then, I just didn't want to be around her anymore. She had told me, yeah, everything's changed. I'm going to do this. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. And then, after we got back together, all of that changed. There was no epiphany by that person. There was no, okay, well, I want to do this or I want to be like this. It was more or less just like, okay, well, I'm pregnant again, so now you have to take care of me. And, it takes two to tango. So I'm not going to talk bad about her. I just wish I would have thought more about who I was having kids with at that moment. I also was branching out, when I say branching out, trying to go and date other people while all this was going on. Because I figured, hey, this is a good way for me to, be able to go do what I need to do. I don't have to worry about the kids because they're there home with their mom. So when I started doing that, the mom got it in her head of like, okay, child support, which a lot of you guys don't know. Child support is a huge anchor around your neck. You can go, I believe, one of three ways with child support. You can pay it and be in your kid's life. You can pay it and not be in your kid's life and just be like, I'm paying this 18-year lease and, being done to it. A lot of guys do that. They pay their child support. They don't worry about the kid anymore. They don't have to, as long as that money's coming out and no one's calling me and I don't have to worry about anything else, then they're cool. Then the third option is to try to just outrun it, like not worry about paying child support and just try to like get paid on the table or do other stuff like that. Um, I'm glad I chose the first option of paying it. Well, obviously I had to pay it, but paying it and still being in my kid's life and doing, what I needed to do. What child support won't tell you is that, trying to help people out here, is that if you have child support and you change jobs or you get a better job, you need to tell child support that you get a better job so they can make you pay more. If you get a better job and they're taking the money out of your paycheck and you don't tell them that you got a different job, they will stop taking money out of your check and start charging you in the rears. I've had friends, a couple of buddies that I knew that for some reason didn't look at their paycheck stubs and thought the child support was coming out and it wasn't, and they were a year in the rear, 2 years in the rear, 6 months in the rear, whatever. You get your license suspended after 3 months in the rear, and then they can put you in jail after a year. So that sucks ass. I never got that bad. I think the most I ever got was a month, but that was because of a clerical error of like not taking stuff out. But anyway, um, when you have a son as a guy, you kind of want your son to be like you, but be better than you. I named my son after me. His middle name being like Dallas because my favorite team is the Cowboys. Yes, I know they lost. And then your daughter, if you only have one daughter, that is like just your pride and joy as a dad. And you try not to play favorites, but it's going to happen, and your daughter is going to be your favorite. She's going to be the one you want to hold on to, the one you want to be around all the time, the one you want to just make sure nothing ever bad happens to her. I used to tell my daughter when she was young, like, well, she is young, but when she was like 5 or 6, like, hey, I hope you grow up and you think all boys are gross and, you just want to worry about school and all this other kind of stuff. She still thinks boys are gross, but like my daughter is, as I'm watching her get older, develop into like a beautiful young woman. And it scares me because, guys are gross. I was a teenager. I know what I think about when I used to see a girl or see like a woman walking by or, doing whatever. And I used to get all excited and stuff. And I don't want that for my daughter, but I know it's going to happen. Um, Dealing with all that stuff, especially with my kids being young, me sitting there, I was just like, okay, what's the best way to combat this? And I made mistakes of like going and getting like married. And I got married because my brother got married. And I had been with this girl for like 5 or 6 years. And I was like, all right, well, he's getting married, so I should get married. So I tried to shove, you know, my kids with, you know, her family. And it was just a bad look. Sup, Ginger. Um, and I shouldn't have mixed those two things yet. She felt overwhelmed having to try to be a mom at such a young age because she was like 5 years younger than me. Kind of threw that on her. Then obviously dealing with all that stuff and dealing with the kids' mom and dealing with work. I was going through the academy. Um, I was not a good husband, so I didn't help her become a good stepmom or mom or whatever the way you want to do it. And it just created friction and undue friction in our relationship. As I've told people before, like my grandpa used to tell me, if you're not ready to get married, don't get married. If you're not ready to understand that someone else's needs outweigh your needs, then you need to be by yourself until you're good with yourself to be able to give to somebody else. And I didn't heed that. That wasn't, part of my deal. I was just more or less like, all right, this is what I want. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. She needs to become a mom or a stepmom like overnight and, love it, which is fucked up to do to somebody because you're putting a lot of onus on them being perfect. And my kids told me before that, like, oh, well, I don't like her, this and this, and I would kind of go along with it. And then, I try to sit down with my son. It's very important to tell your kids how you were brought up so they understand if there's any shortcomings in what you do. So the way I was brought up, and other people that know me, that listen to the ROC or listen to like Baish and Chunk or whatever, know that like I was brought up in a really rough um, household, to where like my dad wasn't the nicest person. That's putting it mildly. My dad used to put his hands on me and use me as a punching bag because I was there. Um, I used to go to school with like bruises all over my arms and my back, and always wear a sweater, even like 90 degree weather. People that do listen to ROC or even breaking down with bass, I have a speech impediment, so uh, I do like stutter and all this kind of stuff, and I tried not to. But when I was a little kid, he used to hit me every time that I did it because he saw it as a sign of weakness. Um, I think the only time my dad actually gave me a hug was when uh, he had hugged me, but slammed me against the wall and started hitting me. And when I told some people this, they're like, "Oh, well, that sucks." It's not that it sucks; it's just more a point of letting other people and your kids understand that, like, you know, it's not that I don't want to be loving. It's just that it takes me a while to get there, and it's not easy because you weren't brought up with it. Doesn't mean you can't do it. You can still do it. It just takes a lot of time and effort and understanding by others. Um, Dealing with certain stuff with your kids is super hard because when your kids are like 10, 11 years old and you're trying to understand, what they're going through and what's going on with them, you think back to what you went through and what was going on with you. And then you try to make solutions based off what you used to do. You know, my son is very introverted, and I can never understand, like, why doesn't he want to go out and like do stuff? Why doesn't he want to go out and play, football? Why doesn't he want to go out and do this and this? That's just not something he wanted to do. And I think I unfairly put a lot of weight and pressure on him to do those things. And that sucks. But I would do that. And then, as he got older, I think he got a little bit, more agitated towards me because he felt like the only reason I was there was to sculpt and mold him into what I wanted, which wasn't true, but I should have came through and like explained that to him. Uh, the the hard boundary of being a single dad is trying to understand what's more important in your life. So my kids weren't with me full time; they're with me every weekend, and every other holiday. So when I would sit there and be like, okay, well, what do I do with my kids this weekend? Well, I can't really do anything because I have to work all the time because I'm paying child support. Plus, I'm paying, my own, rent and my own bills and that kind of stuff. And it sucked because I felt bad because my kids would be over and I'd see them for like 6 or 7 hours a day when I'd have them for three days because I would be at work. And it kind of puts a lot of stress on you as a dad. And a lot of dads will sit there and just take it. Like when you're broke and there's a birthday coming up and you're sitting there like, all right, well, you know, I remember back in the day, I used to go without eating or go without, having lunch at work and like eat once or twice a week. So to be able to save up money to get like my kids gifts for Christmas. I remember one Christmas, like I sold some of my stuff. I took extra odd jobs just to make sure that my kids had stuff to open or stuff to have. And it just felt good to watch them open stuff. Even if you're dead tired or you feel like crap, watching your kids open stuff and be excited about what they open helps. And it gets you to a place that, uh, makes it worth it. Another fatherhood mistake that I made was talking bad about my kid's mom, and sometimes they overheard it. I would sit there and just talk like crap about her because it was easier to place blame on her because of her bad parenting than just understand that like I'm the one who got with that person. I picked that person to have a kid with, and should just been. If I was gonna complain, because we all complain, do it when the kids aren't there. Do it when they're not in earshot. Do it like that. But I didn't. I always talk about calling her like the devil woman, or putting the ringer on my phone when she would call them, the kids would be there. And like it took my daughter telling me when she was like 5, like, "Hey, Dad, like you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't, say those things, or you shouldn't." And I was like, "All right, you know what? I'm sorry." It's kind of sad it took a 5-year-old to tell her grown dad that he needed to, be mature. But, it happens. And um, as a father, you try to navigate around life and try not to let your stress crush you. Because when it gets to a point where, you know, your ex, it happens to a lot of people, your ex wants to date other people, and your ex wants to bring other people around your kids, you really can't do anything. You can't say anything because that's not your business anymore. That's not your prerogative. And it sucks. Then you have to worry about, okay, well, I'm paying child support, I'm paying my other bills, I'm paying all this other stuff. Where am I going to be able to have for me? Because you're paying child support, but you're also providing stuff for your kids when you do see them, or you take them out, or you try to do stuff for them. And I know a lot of guys that, like, let's say they make $3,000 a month, and like 2,200 or 2,000 is going to child support. You can't live off that, and it sucks, and it gets stressful. Then having to deal with your kid's mom who doesn't let you see the kids, add that onto it, and liken to what somebody told me, it's like, you know, being a donkey or a horse, and someone just putting, one saddlebag on you, then another. Then you're stressed about, work, or you're stressed about stuff happening in your own home, or where you're going to live, or another bill or bills. And you just, like, you get to a point where sometimes you just have those moments where, and I've had them a lot, back in the day and even now, where you sit there and you look across when you're sitting on the edge of your bed, or when you're in the shower, or when you're in the mirror, and you just stare at it, and you're just like, what am I here for? Like, what am I doing all this for? you know if I wasn't here, like, my kids could, you know have some life insurance, or I'm not needed to be here right now, or things aren't going the way they need to go or should go, and the best possible thing to do is not be here anymore. I've had those thoughts. I've given into those thoughts a couple of times, and I'm still here because I'm supposed to be here, and because my kids need me to be here. And sometimes it's hard to understand that and come to that realization that you are needed, and things, and you have worth and value. And it sounds like easy, but my eyes are watery. It sounds easy, but it's super hard to understand that you have value, or that you're just not an ATM. And some people joke about it, like, I'm just an ATM, but some guys actually feel that way, to a point where it's just like, my kids say hi to me, or my wife, or my ex, or whatever, and they're only nice to me because of what I can do for them. I think Chris Rock said it, that like women and animals, that women, children, and animals are loved, unconditionally. Men are loved based off of what they can do for you, or what they have for you. And that's very true. It's very, very few women that love a man based off of what he's actually trying to do. That's not a blight on women. It's true. It's very few guys also that see that in a woman and understand it and keep going. the way they're supposed to go with it. But like I said, like being a dad, not understanding that things are going to be bad, things are going to be rough, and sometimes things are going to be horrible. And the way to combat that is just to put your head down and just steam, full steam ahead. Because if you sit there and you wait and you look around and see what's going on, it's going to bog you down. Your one kid needs this, another kid needs this, another kid needs this, or your ex needs this, or this isn't happening, or you're not doing good. Let's say you succumb to like gambling, or you succumb to drinking, or drugs, whatever, and it just adds more weight onto you and more stress onto your life. So that was a very hard hurdle to jump over, and that hurdle always comes back every now and then. But fast forwarding to stuff, being a dad, my son's in high school, and I'm thinking, okay, he's 6'4", he's 190 pounds. My son should be trying to go out for football. Obviously, he didn't want to do it. He wanted to go out for ROTC, which is cool. Did great, got medals, got some awards, all this kind of stuff, but wasn't caring about school, wasn't caring about doing his work, wasn't caring about his grades. And it took me a while to understand that just being a hammer and telling him like, hey, your grades are important. You need to worry and focus on this. Don't worry about just sitting at home, sleeping and doing all this other kind of stuff. Your future is going to creep up on you faster than you think. Like you're having fun and you're 15 now, but 18 is going to come up on you and you're going to be stuck. And, I'm not going to be a safety net behind you if you're not showing me that you're doing something that you're supposed to. And, I'm one of those guys, I'm one of those parents that, what I say is, what I say. So when my son turned 18 and, not to put his business out there, but him not graduating, him flunking because his GPA was horrible and he didn't really care about school. And, I made the same old mistake as I brought his mom into it. I'm like, hey, like, you're trying to be the kid's friend. And then my grandpa told me a long time ago, like, you can either be a kid's friend or you can be their parent. And, if you're going to be their friend, that's cool. Be ready for an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old friend, up until maybe 30-year-old friend living with you until maybe you die. Because you're going to try to always be that kid's friend. Once you, as a parent, you can't be your kid's friend. You can be cool with your kid. You can hope that your kid comes to you and talks to you and, confides in you about stuff and trusts you and that kind of stuff. And that's cool. But if you try to be your kid's friend, it will not work. I know some parents that drink and smoke with their kids. And I'm like, and their kids aren't even like 21. And I'm like, how's that work? Well, I want them to feel comfortable in my house doing that. And next time I talk to them, they're like, oh, well, why are you so pissed? They're like, oh, well, she was having sex in my house. And I'm like, well, you did all this other stuff and told her it was a safe haven. So why are you mad about this? Well, this is different. It's not different in their head. You're their friend. I've had my son say he hates me. Don't bother me. I mean, if your kids don't tell you they hate you every now and then, you're not doing, what you're supposed to do. Because it's easier to be the hammer and make sure they know what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to act than it is to watch them just go down a road they're not supposed to. And because you're their friend, you give them advice, but you don't do anything. So, me being a hammer towards my son and telling him, hey, you need to shape up this and this, and him not doing it. When he got stuck at 18, he was living at his mom's house, not working, doing other kind of stuff, asking me for money, asking me for help. I just told him no. Like, you chose that you wanted to live that life and you wanted to do this and this with her. So I'm going to let you do that. And once you get to a point where you don't want to do that anymore, then you'll go and get an ID or a driver's license. Then you'll go and try to find a job or try to find something and try to make money. Then you'll go and try to understand that, like, the world isn't just going to hand you stuff. You actually have to work for it. And, it's a difficult lesson for him that he's still, going through now. And I remember somebody had told me, asked me a while ago, like, do you spank your kids? I spanked my son when he was younger, and then I think I whooped his ass like for doing something really stupid at school. Um, and I just felt like shit afterwards of like whooping his ass. And when my daughter was old enough, I've never spanked my daughter ever. And the reason why I never spanked my daughter is I never wanted my daughter to equate violence with love. I didn't want to spank her and be like, oh, I love you, because when she gets older, she might think that carries the same amount of weight. You know, I forgot who had said it, but like I took that to heart to where it was just like, I'm not going to spank my daughter. I will correct her and try to steer her in the right way. There's always timeouts. There's talking to her. There's taking stuff away. There's, always stuff. You don't have to go to the first resort of like hitting or yelling. I didn't yell at my daughter either. Didn't raise my voice at her. Um, she's 13 now, and you know, I think her path is a lot better than what his path is, because she understands that, you know, with like my brother or my friends or people I know or her grandparents or you know, even my partner now, like she can go to her and be like, hey, you know, I need help with this. The same tools that my son had to use and never used them because he didn't think he needed to use them, she uses. So I think she's better in that aspect. I don't want to say smarter, because he is smart. Just because you do and act, or actually because you do and say dumb shit doesn't make you dumb. It just makes you immature. Uh, so, she's on the right path of doing that. And then when my son sees stuff like, you know, how his sister is treated, he gets a little butthurt about it. And I try to explain to him, she's young. She doesn't know better. She has room to make mistakes, and it's not dire for her because it can be corrected. You're 18, you're 19, you do something stupid, you go to jail. You do something stupid, you're homeless. So I don't think he understood that, but I think he's getting it now. And, you know, my mom had told me, like, hey, how are things with you and, Dallas? And I was like, they're bad because, you know, my son got to a point where he met a girl, and this happens to a lot of us. Happened to me. That's why, he's here. And he got infatuated with her and wanted to do stuff for her, but had no money to do stuff for her with. So out of the blue one day, he was just like, hey, Dad, can I have money for something to send her? And I was like, hell no. Like, why would I give you money for something? Like, if you get a job, I'll help you get stuff for your job. I'll help you get to your job. I'll, buy you clothes, buy you whatever for your job. I'll buy you stuff, to help with your beard or your hair or whatever else that's going to help you in life. But he wanted something for some girl. And I was like, no. And he decided to unleash his, I don't know, boy anger, teenage angst, whatever on me, telling me that, I was never there for him and I don't do stuff for him and all this kind of stuff. And as a parent, as a dad, for guys out there who are just becoming dads or might already be dads and like don't know what to do or are confused about certain stuff, your kids are gonna say some awful shit to you sometimes. They're gonna say some stuff to you where you're just like, what the hell? If I would have said that when I was younger, I would have got slapped upside the head or just, beaten up. Um, but you got to be able to take it with a grain of salt. You got to be able to sit there and be like, okay, well, it's not, it's their fault, but I'm not going to sit there and be like, you're a horrible person. I did tell him next time I see him, I'm going to whoop his ass on sight, but that's different. But you always have to sit there and understand what the person's going through. And then once you try to figure out what they're going through, if they don't fix it, if they don't try to fix it, then you know, that's on them. The old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but can't make it drink. That's what that is. Um, as many times as you sit down and talk to somebody as a parent, some people get trapped in a horrible rabbit hole where they try to help their kid. They give them money, they give them shelter, they give them food, they keep giving them money, keep giving them shelter, and they keep doing it over and over. And the kid's either on drugs, drinking, doing other stuff, and they're not understanding the help they're getting, but you keep helping them. So I think it's going to keep coming. And then when you finally get fed up with it and they say stuff to you and you just don't know how to take it, that's why for me it's a lot easier understanding and knowing that, hey, like I put down guidelines for my kids. And that's, I think, the most important part of being a dad and going through fatherhood is putting those guidelines down. And if you had a great upbringing, if you had good parents, if you had a good mom, if you had a good dad, if you had a good home, even if both of the parents weren't in the home, that's a good thing to be able to tell your kids to pass down. I didn't have that. Like my mom was either always working or was more focused on other stuff, when I was younger. I don't feel like I was important to her until I got older. And even still then, she wasn't there for most of the stuff. And then when it was, my dad was around or stuff was happening with him or anything like that, then it was just, you know, how can I hurt this person physically? So for me, it's hard, and it was hard to do that, and I had to break I don't want to say a generational thing, but I had to break a way of understanding how things go. Like if people see me, like I'm super lovey, like with my daughter, like I hug her all the time. I'll give her a kiss on the forehead, always happy to see her. I'm always doing stuff for her. If I see my nieces or, my sister-in-law or, anything like that, I'm always super, affectionate with them because I don't want them ever to feel that like, Baish is unloving or Baish isn't like that. When it comes to my son, it's different. That's just, bad blood or whatever you want to call it, like between us. But going forward, um, when I met my wife now, she already had kids. Like she had twins. And for me getting to do that over again with kids that were 10 and trying to put, my stamp on them for them to understand that, like, hey, this is how things need to be done. And to be a man, you have to take accountability for everything you do and take responsibility for the stuff that you do has been awesome and a huge headache because, they're not from me. You know, I can put my stamp on them and they can act like me now and do stuff more like me, which my wife hates. Um, but, it's super difficult. And I don't think a lot of guys know this. It's super difficult to be a stepdad because no matter what, you're not their dad, especially when they're older and they know their dad or they've been around their actual dad. You're never their dad. You're just their stepdad, or it's super difficult. You can put in 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, and that seventh day, the dad comes around and the kids are super excited and, super, whatever to be around their dad, even if for like 10, 15 minutes and the dude leaves. And you're sitting there, you're like, all right, now, I'm left with, these kids being sad because, their dad didn't want to be around them or this and this happened. So I was talking to a buddy of mine who was about to get married, and it's super difficult when stuff happens because the amount of time you put in with your stepkids, you want to feel like, it sounds bad, you want to feel like you're getting something out of it. And you don't want money out of it. You don't want, stuff out of it. You want to feel like you're an equal participant with their dad and you're not. That level, that playing field's like this. It's never like this. Unless, the kid never met his dad, or his dad passed away, or his dad's in prison for the rest of his life, or jail, or whatever, and the dad's not in the picture at all. Um and it's just, it's difficult, it's hard, you know, JG has a, good point there. It's difficult and it's hard to maintain that balance. Because like he says, like you don't want to cross the line of being the kid's dad, but then at the same point, you have to. Because if something happens, you have to get in the ass. When great things happen for them, you gotta have them understand. Like one of the twins, like his girlfriend broke up with him. He was in love with her. So you try to talk to him and have them understand. And when they talk to their actual dad, he kind of brushes it off like it doesn't matter. So now this kid just got shit on by a girl, and then his dad shits on him too. And then you're left sitting there trying to pick up the pieces. And while along, you're trying to deal with, it is stressful. It sounds bad to say it's a stressful situation, but you're sitting there picking up those pieces, you know, with that kid. Then you also have to deal with whatever your partner is going through, having to deal with her ex and the stuff that's going on with you. And then on the other side of the table, if you're the man of the household, you're trying to maintain that household too. And then if you have kids with that same person, you have your kids, and try not to favor your kids that you have combined, you know, with their kid. And then you want to add another dimension to it. Let's say you have a kid with somebody else, like I do. You're trying to bring that whole family atmosphere together. So you have a lot of, you're being attacked on all fronts, and it is stressful. It is hard to put stuff out of your mind and not, worry about it and just sit there and be like, all right, well, I'm trying my best, because let's be honest here, nobody wants a participation trophy. Nobody wants to sit around and be like, oh, I tried my best, but it just didn't happen. I tried to do this, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. Um, like I brought up earlier about the Christmas thing or the birthday thing. Like I'm one of those uncles where I try to get, my nephews or nieces like the best gift, because, I'm Uncle Baish. I try to get my kids the best gift just because if they've done good in school, if they've done good, whatever, I want to be able to acknowledge them, and they know that like I'm thinking of them, and I try to do the best that I possibly could. And when you can't, it's soul crushing. Now, I think a lot of people don't understand this. And I know there's a lot of single moms that go through this stuff and have to maintain the household and have to maintain their kids and have to be mom and dad and do all this other kind of stuff. And, that's awesome. And they have their own podcast for that. They have their own books and all, shows and all that kind of stuff. But for a guy, it's super difficult to be able to have to worry about that, and then understand that, like, as a dad, your feelings don't count. And that's not a woe is me thing. It's a truthful thing. Your feelings really don't count. Because, like, Dylan can attest to, it's like you can go to work for 14, 16, 18 hours a day and come home and still have to do stuff at home and still have to do other stuff. And the only thing you get is, oh, hey, did you forget to do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you pick up this? And we might brush it off and be like, oh, it's not a big deal, but it's a huge ass deal. It's a big ass deal when it comes to certain things where you're just sitting there, you're like, damn, I do all this stuff and I try to put in, time with, my spouse, put in time with the kids, you know, fix stuff around the house or do stuff around the house or help do this and this. And the thanks I get for it is, oh, did you go and did you get this other thing done? And that's super stressful. And that's why I tell people, like, being a dad is a very not joyless, but very hard thing to be. It's easy to make a kid. You can find a girl, not have protection, have sex, have a kid, and pay child support or run or do whatever and not worry about, being a good dad. You can also be with the person, have a kid there, and still not be a good dad. It takes a lot of effort and time to be a good father. It takes a lot of soul crushing, you know, not anger ridden, but just moments of sitting in the shower, clenching your fist, or on your drive home when nobody's in the car with you, maybe shedding a couple of tears and just being like, dude, this fucking sucks. People always say, like, you know, mothers have it the hardest, but dads have it hard too, because we're always looked to make sure and maintain the household and maintain everything else. But guess what? You can't get loud, you can't get angry, because then you're labeled as an angry guy or a bad guy or not sensitive or not feeling or not caring. It just sucks. You know, it gets difficult. And the more dads I meet, you know, I have friends that, like I said before, are on child support. I have friends that have admitted, like, my father-in-law has admitted, like, he was a bad dad. He's a great, like grandfather. Like, he's great. Um, but he's admit, like, he wasn't a good father. He provided, but, like, he wasn't good at interacting with his kids, and he was an angry person, and he wish he could go back and change that, but he wasn't raised that same way. I know dudes that, are great dads, and they do all these kind of things. And, I always reference Bluey because I love Bluey. But, like, when I watch the cartoon Bluey, I feel like a bad dad because of how awesome, Bandit, the Bluey's dad, is, of, doing imaginary games with them, playing with them all the time, doing this other kind of stuff. And then when I sit there and I try to sit there, I'm like, oh man, I wish I could have done that. And then you start thinking about it and you start, understanding, man, I could have done this and this and this. That's the worst thing a guy, a dad, can do. When you start sitting there thinking about what you could have done, what you should have done, what could have came out, then you will spiral. Because I've done that, where I sit there and I try to think of, like, oh man, I should have done this to my son, I should have done this to my daughter, I should have done this and this. And then you start thinking back, like, okay, when you open that little, pothole of shit in your life, then for me personally, it dives down into, like, what my dad used to do to me. And then I figure, like, okay, well, I'm not that bad. And then when you start thinking I'm not that bad, comparing, that's when you get into that bad stage of, like, I've done enough. You should always think that you can do more, so that when the opportunity comes up, when you are with your kids, to do more. Like, now when my daughter's here, like, I try to make sure that I work at night when everyone's asleep, so I don't miss time with her. I try to make sure that she has, what she needs, or, what she wants, but it's difficult. You know, with the with the twins, I try to guide them, and when they need a high five, when they need, us joking around, or us going to Korean barbecue, or us doing stuff like that to talk or hang out or whatever, we do that. But when they don't do what they're supposed to do, I'm super quick to put a foot in their ass, and they understand that. And like I told them, like, I try to make them accountable for what they do. That's why when stuff happens, I don't sit there and be like, "Oh, you did this, you did this, you did this." No, I sit there and ask them, like, why do you think we're having this conversation? Did you, what were you supposed to do, and what was done? And when they tell me, like, okay, well, I didn't do this and this and happened, I ask them, so what should happen to you? And if they give me like an off the wall punishment, I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. But they've been better at understanding, like, what they do and giving themselves consequences to what they do because of what I've taught them and what they need to understand. When something happens and they've done something they're not supposed to do, they understand that it's up to them to rectify the situation and not hide from it. Um, you know, my oldest son, he is hopefully he comes around and tries to understand that like life isn't gonna always feed you. Life isn't always going to be there to provide for you. There's always not going to be a safety net. His mom's not going to always be there. You know, my mom's not going to always be there. I'm not going to always be there. He needs to find a way to be able to do better and be better. And up to this point, he hasn't gotten there yet. But, you know, I'm trying to think about where was I at 19? And, you know, I was a dad already. So he hasn't fallen into that trap yet. Well, it's not a trap, but he hasn't fallen into that yet, you know. So for the first part of this fatherhood thing, I wanted to do it by myself so people would understand a little bit of the background of like who I am, where I came from, of uh, how I grew up and how bad my situation was when I was a kid, of being like beat on and other stuff. I used to push my brain into like comic books. I used to push my brain into video games at at my friend's house. I used to push my brain into football because the more I was at football or baseball, the less I was at home. So that's why I used to push myself into that. So for people, like if a kid sees this and you're at home and you're getting your ass whooped and you can't get away and like you have to deal with it, and some people think, oh, you don't have to deal with it. They don't understand. So if you have to deal with it, push your mind into something else. A comics, a book, art, music, a sport. You know what I mean? Like put your mind somewhere else and try to spend as much time doing that than being at home or being around that situation, because it will mess you up mentally. Like I've gotten pretty good now, but it took a lot of, you know, therapy within myself and therapy with, someone else, and having friends around me that help me. They don't enable me. And like I told people a while ago, like you either have a circle or you have a cage. When you have a cage around you, it's people that are yes men that just telling you stuff, batting it back and forth, and there's no way out. It's just, oh yeah, you can do that. Oh yeah, you can do that. It's not your fault. You don't take accountability for that. It happens to everybody. You can do this, you can do that. Instead of being honest and real with you in your circle, however small it may be, of somebody telling you you messed up, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, you should be doing this. You are, or you need to be the best version of yourself to be able to get yourself to that next level. Because there are levels to everything, even in fatherhood. When you start out in infancy of being a dad, when you first see your kid, you know, you can choose to spend time with your kid or pawn them off on their grandparent or on their mom. And as the kid gets older, you can choose to spend time with the kid or do the same thing again. So, there are levels to everything. So, in this first part, I wanted to get where I came from, a little backstory into, my kids and what I go through as a dad and my feelings on being a dad and all that kind of stuff. So, the next time that we are here on Breaking It Down with Baish, um, I will have a couple guests on. I believe I'll have two on that are also dads and talk about the stuff that they go through and what they've been through and their kind of mental state of the things that go on with them and all that kind of stuff. So, this is part one. So there will be a part two. And like I said in the beginning, I don't have a cool intro like, Jukebox or like Stan or like Vinny or like, Patrick. I don't have any of that stuff yet, but it will be coming. It will be here. So, you know, stay tuned for the next episode of Breaking It Down with Baish. I appreciate y'all listening. And yeah, have fun. Don't get stressed out. Watch Bluey. It's on Disney Plus or on YouTube. Watch it. It's great. It's wholesome. It's amazing. It'll make you feel better about yourself. Also, listen to Jukebox Ginger. Listen to Stan. Listen to Vinny Green. His book's coming out March 1st. What am I missing? Uh, uh, Laura Perez. She's working with the ROC too, the Return of the Critics. starting her tattoo thing. So look her up on IG, Return the Critics. There's a podcast. Look them up on Spotify and almost every other podcasting spot to listen. Or also on IG, Return the Critics with the other fellas. So yeah, I am Baish. It's been Breaking It Down with Baish. Thank you for listening, me hearing me ramble.